The hand over her mouth smelled of cigarettes and old money, and in the total black of that dead corridor Nala Kwame could not see the man she loved. She could only hear him, somewhere behind her, roaring her name into a darkness he could not cross. 3 seconds ago his hand had been wrapped around hers. Then the whole tower had died at once. Every light, every screen, and a grip that was not his had closed over her mouth and begun dragging her backward toward a door. And here is what the man pulling her did not know, because he had spent 9 years studying the wrong person. He had built his entire plan on the woman who folded, the one who made herself smaller in every room and apologized for the space her body took. That woman did not live here anymore. So she bit down, hard on the glove, until she tasted leather and the grip jerked. She did not scream, because screaming was air she needed. She did what no one had ever taught her, and her own fear taught her in that second. She let her knees go and dropped her whole body weight straight toward the floor, turning herself from a thing that could be carried into a thing that had to be dragged. It bought 1 second, maybe 2. In that world, 2 seconds was a country. Behind her in the black, she heard a body move, fast, lethal. The man she loved closing the distance to the sound of her, and for one heartbeat, she believed he would reach her. He did not reach her. His fingers closed on the trailing edge of her robe, and the fabric tore loose in his hand, and that scrap of cream cloth was all the most powerful man in Seoul came away holding while the woman he had given an empire to protect was pulled through a door he could not see. He had built his whole life on control, on knowing the room before he entered it. And he stood in the absolute dark of his own home with a torn piece of her robe in his fist and understood, for the first time since he was a boy, what it was to be helpless. Then the door sealed shut, the dark went quiet, and somewhere far below a single engine turned over. When the backup lights stuttered on, low and amber, Ji-chan found him exactly there, unmoving, the cloth at his heart. And what frightened Ji-chan, in 11 years of frightening things, was not rage. He had seen Lee Yun's rage. This was worse. This was the stillness that came before Lee Yun did something the city would talk about for a decade. They had a key card, Ji-chan said quietly. The private elevator. It came from inside this house. I know whose card it was, Lee Yun said. His voice had gone somewhere very far away and very cold.
Hansu.
Tae-jin's sister. He finally looked up. Bring me everything we have on where that family sleeps. Ji-chan did not move yet because there was a thing that had to be said, and only he was allowed to say it. You signed the empire away an hour ago. The territory, the routes, the name, it is already gone, exactly the way you wanted. You did it to take the leverage out of his hands. A flicker of dread crossed his face. But it means you walk into the house of the most powerful family in this country tonight with no army that is legally yours and nothing to trade. You will be one man. Lee Yun knotted the scrap of her robe around his hand and looked out at the city he no longer owned, the city he had bled for 9 years to hold, and felt nothing for it at all. One man is enough, he said, when the one man has already lost the only thing they could take. He turned from the glass. They think I came empty-handed. Let them. A man with everything to lose negotiates. A man with nothing left to lose arrives. He started for the elevator, and his voice dropped to almost nothing. Get the car. We're going to get her back tonight, or there will not be a tonight worth having. The car cut through the wet streets toward the edge of the city, toward old money and older walls, and in the back seat Lee Yun did not speak. He had spent the courtship being patient. The note.
The dress.
The near touch he had held himself back from for weeks because he wanted her to choose him with open eyes. He had been the most careful he had ever been with anything in his life, and a man had reached into the one careful thing he owned and torn it out of his hands in the dark. The patience was over now. Every part of it. They put her in a beautiful room and locked the door, and the old Nala would have made herself small in the chair and waited to be told what she was worth. She sat up straight instead. She put her bare feet flat on the cold floor and her hands flat on her knees, and she made herself, on purpose, take up the whole chair. Because somewhere across the city a man had just learned she was gone, and she knew, the way she knew her own heartbeat, that he was already coming. Her job was not to shrink until he did. Her job was to still be standing when that door opened. Tae-jin came in like a man visiting a painting he had just bought. He looked at her sitting straight in the hard chair, and something flickered across his face. Surprise, quickly hidden, because the prize was supposed to be weeping. You don't fold, he said, almost pleased. He trained that into you, or you came with it. Either way, it doesn't matter. You were never a person in this, Miss Kwame. You were a price tag. The most expensive one in the city, hung around the neck of the one man who swore he'd never wear one. You keep saying price, Nala said quietly. Her voice did not shake, and the not shaking surprised her more than him. Like the worth is the problem. You spent 9 years circling that man looking for a weakness, and the day he finally loves something, you call it a flaw and reach for it. You don't understand him at all. You think you took his weakness tonight. You took the one thing that turns a careful man into one who has nothing left to lose. You didn't disarm him. You loaded him. For just a moment, the predatory ease on Tae-jin's face thinned. But he only smiled because he believed he had already won, and walked her down a corridor into a hall that stopped the breath in her throat. It was older than anything she had seen in this country of glass towers. Black stone and gold screens, and a crimson runner that led, like a tongue, toward a single high seat at the far end. This was not an office or a penthouse. This was a throne room. And Nala understood, walking its length with her bare feet cold on the stone, that she had been wrong about the size of the thing she was standing in. Lee Yun was a king, but kings, she was about to learn, answer to dynasties. Han Su was already there, standing against the gold screens, and when Nala was led and their eyes met across the crimson runner, the cold woman who had once catalogued Nala's body like a defect could not hold the look. She glanced away first, and Nala filed that away, except this was not cruelty. This was a woman coming apart at the seams of her own loyalty. And there, at the head of it all, in a single high chair like a verdict waiting to be read, sat an old man. He was lean and rigid and silver, and the air in the hall bent toward him the way it had once bent toward Lee Yun in his lobby, except more, older, deeper. Tae-jin's whole easy confidence changed the instant he came into the old man's sightline, straightened, dimmed, the way a grown man's does only in front of one person on earth. Father, Tae-jin said, and Nala finally understood the question she had been chasing since an elevator weeks ago. You don't know whose sister I am. Han Su was not a rival boss's sister. She was the daughter of this. The Han dynasty was not a gang. It was the oldest power in the country, and Tae-jin had just dragged a kidnapped foreign woman into his father's house. The old man's hooded eyes moved over Nala once. Not the way Tae-jin had, pricing her. Not the way the cruel gazes of her whole life had, finding her lacking. He looked at her the way a judge looks at a piece of evidence that has been brought into his court without his permission. Stand her there, Han Gang said. His voice was dry and quiet and carried to every corner. Then, to his son, without warmth, you brought a stolen woman into my house, through my gate, under my name. Explain to me why I should not be ashamed of the blood you carry. She is leverage, Tae-jin said, and even he heard how thin it sounded in this hall. Lee Yun signed his territory away to protect her. Tonight. The whole operation, 9 years of his family's work, it can be ours, father, without a single shot, if we simply hold the woman until he what? The old man did not raise his voice. Bows? Begs. He rose from the chair, slowly, and the whole hall seemed to rise with the threat of it. I built this house on one law. We do not take what cannot be taken with honor. Your grandfather killed men for less than what you did tonight, and they were men. You laid hands on an unarmed woman in the dark and called it strategy. And then a voice none of them expected cut across the hall. I let them in. Han Su stepped off the wall. Her brother spun toward her, and she did not flinch. I gave the men my card. I am the inside person everyone is looking for. She lifted her chin at her father. So, if you are weighing the shame of this house tonight, weigh mine too. I did it out of spite, because that woman has something I was never once given. Someone who looks at her like she is the answer and not the arrangement. Now, while your heart is doing whatever it is doing right now, let me ask you for something small. Whether you have been with Nala since the night she landed in the city, or you just fell into this story in the dark like she did, tap subscribe. Not because I am asking, but because it is the single signal that tells this channel these stories deserve to keep being made. Subscribe, stay in the dark with her. And let's go get her back. Because the door is about to open, and the man who tore that scrap of cloth from his own hand is already at the gate. The black sedan came through the Han gate without slowing, and the men posted there did not stop it. because Ji-chan had gone ahead an hour before with the one currency that still moved in that world, the truth. He had spent that hour doing what 11 years of silence had made him very good at: listening, asking the right old men the right quiet questions. And what Ji-chan had carried to the Han Gate was not a threat. It was a fact that changed the entire shape of the night, the fact that Tae-jin had not told his father the whole story, and that the thing Tae-jin thought he had won was already gone. Here was the truth Ji-chan had carried, the one that reversed the whole trap. Lee Yun had not signed his empire over to Tae-jin, or to anyone Tae-jin could reach. In the single clear hour he had before the raid, the Iceman had done the last cold-blooded thing of his career. He had signed the entire operation, every route and holding and asset, into a sealed trust controlled by the one authority even Tae-jin would never cross, the Han Dynasty's own ancient council, with one condition written into it: that it could never be claimed by force, by blackmail, or by any hand that had spilled blood to take it. Tae-jin had kidnapped a woman to seize an empire that, by his own family's oldest law, his crime had just made it impossible for him to ever touch. They brought the sealed document to the old man in his study, and Han Gang read it once, in silence, and his jaw worked beneath the silver beard. His son had not merely shamed the house by stealing a woman. His son had been outmaneuvered so completely that he had committed the crime for nothing, had stained the Han name in the open, in front of the dynasty's own council, chasing a prize that the very rules of that council now placed forever beyond him. The old man set the paper down with the care of someone setting down a thing he intended to use as a blade. And then the doors of the great hall opened, and Lee Yun walked in alone. No men, no weapons drawn. Just one man in a charcoal suit with a scrap of a woman's robe knotted around his hand, walking the Crimson Runner toward a dynasty as if he had been invited. The whole room turned. Tae-jin's hand twitched toward his side. And Nala, standing near the high seat with her bare feet on the cold stone, felt her entire chest break open at the sight of him, because she had told herself he would come and here, against every sensible thing, he was. For 1 second the war, the dynasty, the old man on his throne, all of it fell away, and there were only the two of them at opposite ends of a red runner, the way there had once been only the two of them at opposite ends of an escalator. He did not run to her. She did not run to him. They had both spent their lives being careful, and they let the look hold the distance, his eyes moving over her once to be sure she was whole, and not once, even here, dropping to her body the way the whole world's eyes always had. Lee Yun stopped before the high seat and did not bow, and the old man noted it without offense, because he understood the language of men who bowed to no one. "You signed your house into my council's trust," Han Gang said, "knowing my law, knowing it would put it past my son's reach forever. You gambled your entire inheritance on the chance that I am still a man of that law." "No," Lee Yun said. "I gambled nothing. I gave the empire away, because I do not want it. I came here for one thing, and it is standing by your chair in a torn robe." Tae-jin felt it then, the floor of his own plan giving way beneath him, and he did what cornered men do. He reached for the woman one more time, the only card he had left. "She is still mine to hand back or not," he said, too fast. "Father, the trust means nothing if I hold the one thing he came for. He gives me a way back into that operation, a seat, a share, and the woman walks. That is still a deal. That is still, his father said coldly, a man trying to sell a woman he stole. In my hall, to my face. And then the woman everyone in that hall had been bargaining over took one step forward and spoke for herself. "Stop," Nala said. Not loudly, but the whole hall stopped. She walked off the steps of the high seat onto the Crimson Runner, and for the first time in her life, she did not check whether she was allowed. "You have all spent tonight discussing what I am worth. The price, the leverage, the thing to be handed back." She looked at Tae-jin without a flicker of fear. "I crossed an ocean to become no one. I spent 26 years making myself small enough that no one would bother to want me. And the cruel joke of it is that the smaller I made myself, the more invisible I became, the more I thought that was safety. Then one man looked at me in an airport and refused to let me disappear. Not because he wanted to own me, because he could not stand to watch me erase the one thing in his whole cold world worth seeing." She pressed her hand flat to her own chest. "So here is what I am worth. I am not a price. I am not a weakness. I am the reason the most powerful man in this city gave away an empire and walked into a dynasty's house alone. That is not the woman who folds. Look at me. None of you are ever going to make me fold again." The old man looked at her for a long moment, and something in his austere face shifted. The recalculation of a man who has spent 70 years measuring power and has just been shown a kind he did not have on his scales. "My son," Han Gang said at last, not taking his eyes off Nala, mistook this woman for the weak point in his enemy. He finally turned his head toward Tae-jin, and his voice went to iron. He could not see that she is the strongest person who has walked into this hall in 20 years, including the men. Then the old man passed the sentence, and it was worse than any bullet because it came from his own blood. "You are stripped," Han Gang told his son. "Your seat on the council, your share of this house, your standing in the name. From tonight you carry the Han blood, and not one thing it grants you. You will leave this country, and you will not return while I breathe." His voice did not rise. "You wanted an empire so badly you stole a woman to reach it. So you will live the rest of your life with nothing, and you will know that you did it to yourself, in front of your father, for a prize your own crime put forever out of your hands." And that was the fall of Han Tae-jin. Not dragged out by Lee Yun's men, not bloodied on a corridor floor, unmade by his own father in his own house, with the whole council as witness for the oldest reason in the world, that a man who reaches for a person as if she were a thing will, in the end, be left holding nothing at all. He looked, for one moment, at Nala, the woman he had called a price tag. She did not look away, and she did not gloat. She simply let him see that she had been a person the entire time. Then he was let out, and the great doors closed behind the smallest man in the room. If you are still with me, still here in this hall, do one thing. Drop a comment and tell me you are still watching, however it comes out, and throw in the one emoji that matches your face right now, because I know it is not a calm one. Tell me where you are watching from and what time it is where you are, because someone out there is deep in the night swearing they will sleep after one more minute. And if you are on your TV, hit like so I know you are in the room. Then stay, because the cold part of the story is over, and what comes next is the part she crossed an ocean hoping for. As the hall emptied, Han Soo came to Nala, and for a moment the two women who had every reason to hate each other simply stood. "I let them take you," Han Soo said. "I won't insult you by asking forgiveness. I spent my whole life being the arranged thing. Tonight, I finally chose something, and it was to stop. That is the only good thing I have ever done with this name." "Then it counts," Nala said. And she meant it, because the woman in front of her had also been raised to make herself into whatever a powerful family required, and Nala, of all people, knew exactly what it cost to finally refuse. Before they left, the old man spoke once more, and it was not a threat. "The trust holds," Han Gang told Lee Yun. "Your house returns to you clean by the council's hand, since you took it past my son's reach by honor and not by blood. I do not give gifts." His hooded eyes moved to Nala. "I am paying a debt. My family put hands on this woman. The Han name owes her. As long as I sit in this chair, no one in this country will ever again mistake her for something to be taken. It was from a man like that, the closest thing to a blessing the world allowed." Outside the hall, in the cold blue hour before dawn, Lee Yun took both her hands. The empire was his again, handed back clean. The man who had been willing to lose everything had lost nothing. And he found, holding her hands in the gray light, that he did not care about a single piece of it except as a wall he could now put between her and the world. "I would have let it all go," he said. "I did let it all go. The only thing I could not survive was the door closing on you in the dark." She remembered then a thing he had said weeks ago over candlelight. "Give me their names." The people from before, the ones who had taught a little girl to fold her shoulders and walk like an apology. "You asked me once for their names," she said. "The people who made me small." She shook her head slowly. "I don't want you to find them." That was the old fear, thinking the only way to be safe from cruelty is more power than the cruel. She touched his face. "You already undid them. Not by hurting anyone. By being the one person who looked at all of me and told me to take up space. They don't live in me anymore. You crowded them out." And then the sun came up. It came up the way it does after the longest nights, slow and pale and gold, spilling over the old tiled walls of a dynasty's house and across a stone garden where the mist was lifting at last. The cold that had run through this whole story, the cold of an airport at midnight, the cold of a corridor gone dark, the cold of a woman who had spent her life making herself disappear, finally broke. She had arrived in this country curled inward on an escalator, dragging 2 suitcases and a lifetime of making herself smaller, praying no one would look. She stood now in the gold light of a new morning with the most dangerous man in the city's hand resting easy at the small of her back, her shoulders thrown open, her chin high, taking up every inch of the space her body was always meant to fill, and she was not praying to be invisible anymore. She was, for the first time in 26 years, exactly the right size. He turned her gently to face him in the gold light, and this time there was no near touch, no held-back hand. No, not yet. There was no empire to settle first, and no truth left to confess, and no door waiting to open on the dark. There was only a woman who had chosen to be found and a man who had given away a kingdom to keep her, standing in the first warm light either of them had felt in years. He kissed her, and it was nothing like the desperate one in the dark before the lights went out. It was slow. It was certain. It was a man and a woman who had walked through the longest night of both their lives and come out the other side, in the morning, together. They walked out through the great timber gate together as the sun cleared the wall, the Iceman and the woman who had taught him there were warmer things to hold than territory, leaving the old dark house behind them. Behind those walls a dynasty would go on, an old man would sit in his chair, a freed daughter would begin, for the first time, to build a life that was her own. And ahead of them was a city that had learned, in a single night, a new name to be careful of, and it was not Li Yun's. It was hers. The girl who came to Seoul ashamed of every curve, who folded her shoulders inward and walked like an apology and crossed an ocean praying to be no one, stood in the gold light of the morning she had survived for, and took up all the space in the world. She was seen. All of her. And she would never make herself smaller again. And that is the whole story, from a woman who crossed an ocean to disappear to a woman an entire city learned the name of. So before you go, tell me the one feeling this left you holding, just one word, drop it in the comments. And subscribe, because the next complete love story is already waiting. Thank you for staying to the very end. You were in the room. That mattered.